We start the today's class on Parashat Haye Sara. The parasha opens with the passing of Sara. Vayu Haye Sara 100 shana ו20 shana ו7 shanim. She lived 107 years, 127 years. Different commentaries on why it's written in such a format, but that's the way the Torah writes it. In verse 2 of chapter 23, we read, Vatamut Sara בקריית ארבע היא חברון בארץ כנען, ויבוא אברהם לספוד לשרה ולבכותה. Sarah dies in Kiryat Arba, which is Hebron, and Avraham comes from afar to mourn Sarah. And the question is, why is he coming from afar? Was he traveling? This is a source of questions for the commentators. I think that it's possible to say that after the Akedah, maybe Avraham and Sarah did not live close to each other. It could have been that she was upset that this happened, and she moved away from Beersheba. And now, after she dies, he comes to eulogize or mourn for her. And remember, we spoke last week about. We didn't have time to speak about the Akedah so much, but the important thing to remember that the fact that the three events are mentioned in juxtaposition, the death of Sarah, and prior to that, the birth of Rivka, prior to that, the Akedah, does not mean that they all happened at the same time, but rather those are the important events that took place in the last years of Abraham's or of Sarah's life. There's interesting commentary in Rashi here. נסמכה מיתת שרה לעקדת יצחק, לפי שעל ידי בשורת העקדה שנזדמן בינה לשחיטה וכמעט שלא נשחט, פרחה נשמתה ממנה ומתה. The death of Sarah is mentioned right after the story of the Akedah, because it was the news that she heard about the Akedah, that her son almost died, that she died out of fear, out of shock. So Rashi here follows the famous assumption that it happened at the same time, and according to that, Yitzhak would have been 37 at the time of the Akedah, which is of course impossible. The Ibn Ezra says that maybe it was 12 or 13. I think that it probably was even younger than that. But in later Ashkenazi tradition, this idea of Sarah dying immediately after the Akedah became a story of martyrdom. So Sarah dies as a martyr. She says, I wanted to offer my son as a sacrifice to God, and God rejected it, and then she either commits suicide or she dies out of sorrow, but she becomes the replacement for that sacrifice which was not given, the sacrifice of Yitzhak. So that comes from a perception that I discussed in other classes of martyrdom as the ultimate mitzvah, and that is something was common in the Ashkenazi community because of the influence of Christianity. But the more important story in this chapter is the dialogue between Avraham and the Hittites, the people of Het. So Avraham speaks to the people of Het. So here's the text that we will look at. Avraham is talking to the Hittites. He speaks to them and he says, "Please let me bury my dead." And they answer, "No, we can give you the grave." And then he bows down again. He says, "Please talk to Ephron. Let him sell me his cave of Machpelah." And Ephron says, "No, I'll give it to you." And Avraham bows down again. And he says, "No, please let me pay." And Ephron then says, "Okay, 400 shekel kesef, 400 coins of silver. It's nothing. Just pay it and bury your dead." So this whole exchange is very strange. And a lot of people, a lot of commentators and midrash, once again the cable, a lot accused Ephron of being a hypocrite, because first he says, I'm going to give you the cave as a gift, but then he says he wants the full price. But what happens here is something completely different. This is not an exchange. This is not about buying land. What it is, it's Avraham trying to declare himself a citizen of the land. And maybe that's why the rabbi said that this was a trial to Abraham when he tried to find land for his wife, and he couldn't, for the burial of his wife, and he couldn't find. Because ostensibly, one could have said, why is it such a problem? They offered him a gift, he should have taken it. But then he refused, so it's not really a trial, it's his problem. But what Abraham is trying to do here, Abraham is trying to claim the land. And having a person buried in the land makes a personal connection. It makes it a sacred site. We know how we respect places where people are dear to us are buried there. And Abraham wanted to be there not as a guest of the Hittite, but rather someone who owns the land. And this is conveyed with the Abraham's words. Look, Ger v'toshav anochem achem. I'm a stranger and a sojourner with you. Give me a possession of a burying place. It's even more than the word possession. This is quite an accurate translation. The word in Hebrew is ahuzat kever. Le'ehoz in Hebrew is to hold, to grab onto something. So ahuzat kever, he says it's a grave site, which for me will be a stronghold in the land, because if I own it, I own the land. So he says, I want to purchase from you a burial site, but by purchasing the burial site, you actually acknowledge that I am a citizen of that land. The Hittites refuse to do that, and they say, hear us, you are a mighty prince among us. So they give him respect. You are a very respectful person, and we love you. We will give you any grave you want as a gift. So they're very politely providing him with what he needs, but they really depriving him of his ultimate goal, which is to own the land. He bows down. He wants to show that he's really thankful to them. And he says, if you really are interested in doing that, and he's using the fact that Sara is in front of him and he's not buried yet, please talk to Ephron ben Zohar and let me buy from him the cave. And he said again, he insists that he wants to buy the cave. Ephron answers Abraham, and the Torah highlights that be'oznei b'nechet lechol ba'eshar iro lemor. He speaks in front of everyone, meaning this is not about the monetary exchange. It's not about the transaction. It's about the political statement. And since it's a political statement, whether Abraham owns the land or not, it has to be in front of the whole council and all the people. And he says, I give it to you as a gift in front of everyone. He says, Lo Adoni, meaning I reject your proposal. You will not buy the land. Abraham bows again, and tells Ephron, I would like to pay you. And so he puts them on the spot, on a situation where they cannot refuse, because that would be they could be impolite. So Ephron now tries the last resource, the last thing that he could do is to ask for an exorbitant price, and if maybe this will deter Abraham, but it doesn't work. He says, "Eretz 400 shekel kesef beni v'nechamahi." Shekel kesef, like Rashi says, this is like heavy coins. This are like the best silver. Very, it's a hefty price for a cave. He says it's nothing. Vet metechak vo. But Abraham does that, and he pays him. And as a result, Vayakom sde Ephron asher machpelah, the field of Ephron became the possession of Mamre, of Abraham. And the Torah says here, all the trees that were in the field, that were on all the border thereof round about, were made sure. So that also shows us that we're talking here about a transaction that was a statement of possession and citizenship in the land, because using the trees as markers, as boundaries for the field, was a common practice in the ancient Near East. We know that from documents that have been recovered in the Assyrian Babylonian libraries. So that is just this story of the burial of Sarah, though we see there are subtle messages behind this apparently very clear and transparent dialogue. What they're really talking about is who owns the land. Okay, after this, we have the story of Abraham sending his servant to fetch a bride for Yitzhak. And you see that throughout the parasha, Eliezer is not mentioned by name. Everybody who tells the story speaks about Eliezer and Rivka, but the it might have been Eliezer, because the Torah says Avdo Zekan Beto Moshel Bechol Asher Lo, the elder of his house that ruled over all that he had. And in the previous parasha, he referred to Eliezer as the one who rules over everything he has. However, the Torah avoids calling Eliezer by name, because he remains here anonymous. He's Eved Avraham, and that is important always when you look at the narratives of the Torah, to see the names and titles given to a person. Just as such, for example, when Ishmael is driven away, he is referred to as either Ishmael by name, or Ben Ha'amah, the son of the maidservant, or Ben Avraham, the son of Avraham, or the Na'ar, the lad. So it depends who speaks and what context, and then a different name is given to a person. But here, the Eved is called Avraham's servant throughout the parasha. Now, the what was the reason that Avraham sends his servant to Haran to fetch a bride? So traditionally, people think that he wanted to get someone from Avraham's family, but when we read the story carefully, we see that this is not the case. Avraham didn't really want, or not necessarily wanted someone from the family. Remember that he's not in such good contact with the family. When he hears the news about the delivery of his nephews, they already ate. Right? At the end of the previous parasha, we read, Avraham was told, Milcah also bore children for your brother, like all these people, they were not born in 1 year, at least 8 years, even if they were consecutive. But it says so one of them is already 20 years or 20 something years old, and he has a child. So years passed between the contact of one person and another. So Avraham didn't really have close contact with his family in Haran, and we'll see that. My theory of how this whole thing happens is that Avraham's interest was not necessarily in Haran, but not necessarily in the family, but once the servant found someone from the family, he was able to manipulate the family into believing that Avraham really wanted the family specifically. So here we see we have to constantly compare the events to the way they were rendered by the servant. So when Avraham sends his servant, he says this in verse 4 of chapter 24, Ki el arzi ve'el moladati telech. Go to my country and to my kindred, and take a wife for my son. But when he speaks to the family, he says, my master told me you should go to my father's house and my kindred, and take a wife for my son. Now this is misleading, because the word kindred here is used to translate mishpahti, and in verse 4 it is used to translate moladeti. So they are not the same. Arzi, moladeti, mishpahti, bet avi. There are 4 different levels. So what are they? They are Eretz is the land, Moledet is the clan, Mishpaha is the extended family, and Bet Avi is the immediate family. So when Avraham tells the servant to go to Haran, he says, I want you to go to my land and to my clan, to my kin, but not necessarily to my family. The servant says my family. So what was really Avraham's interest? I think that what Avraham wanted was this. He clearly tells the servant, "Lo tikach isha livni mibnot haKanaani asher anochi yoshev bikirbo." You should not, my son, should not take a wife from the Canaanite women. Why? What was so bad with the Canaanite women? So Rashi comments the Canaanites are cursed, and the descendants of Abraham are cursed cannot marry the descendants of the Canaanite. The descendants of Abraham are blessed. They cannot marry the descendants of Canaan who are cursed. But that stands in contrast to what other midrashim say, that Abraham would go from place to place and convert people. There's even a midrash, that Rashi quotes on the Parashat, that the servant, when the servant says, maybe, perhaps, the woman would not want to follow me, he said is as wishful thinking, that he wished that the woman would refuse to go, and then, according to the Midrash, it's Eliezer's daughter would become Yitzhak's wife. And Abraham's answer, according to the Midrash, is, Ani baruch ve'ata arur, ve'en baruch mitdabek be'arur. I am blessed, and you are cursed, and the cursed one cannot cling to the blessed one. This is mind-blowing. Because you think about this Midrash, what this Midrash is saying. It says that Abraham has a servant who, according to other Midrashim, was also a practitioner of the Hebrew, whatever faith it was, the Abrahamic faith, right? But Abraham says, I draw a line. You are not going to marry my family. I'm sorry. You're a wonderful person. I like you. You could join the minyan with me, but you're not going to marry my daughter. I think we hear here a hint of racism, of exclusion, of xenophobia. What is happening here? So the Midrash was said. I think that is the explanation. The Midrash was written at the time when there was assimilation, when people married other nations, not necessarily always through conversion. And when Rashi says that was also something that was happening in Europe. And Rashi takes this Midrash and he uses that to affirm the stance of the Jewish community, saying we are different. It was important for them to carry that flag, to say we are blessed and other people are cursed, because at the time they felt the exact opposite. They were under the heel of oppressing nations, of the Germans, of the Catholic Church. They didn't feel good. So at least saying that, it said, no, we know we are blessed. We know we're going to overcome. That was important to them. But that's the commentary. And if we think of Avraham as someone who has to shine light onto the nations, of someone who stands and defends even Sodom, why would it be a problem for him to have his son marry a Canaanite woman? And I think that the answer is that Avraham wants that new bride to grow and to be educated with the mentality and the philosophy of the household of Avraham. And if she is a local woman, she will keep going back to her family and will never fully accept the influence of Avraham. So what Avraham wants is to take someone from afar, uproot her, replant her with his family, so she would have total immersion in that culture. So why Haran of all places? Because the only place where the servant can go and convince the parents of a young woman, to join him in this journey to Canaan, would be a place where Avraham is known, when Avraham is familiar. Because remember that they don't have the means of communication as we have today. There's no Abraham's Facebook page, or Yitzhak is going on eHarmony to find a bride. They don't know anything about him except for what the servant is saying. So if he goes to another country, if he goes to Ur-Kasdim, or if he goes to Egypt, people don't know who Avraham is. They wouldn't send their daughter with him. But if it's someone from the clan who left years ago and still have relatives there, this is a possibility. So it doesn't say not from the family, but in general, he could. He has better chances in Haran. Yes, Shayna, the question.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so this has never made sense to me, because if he converted all these different people, then there's people who are already believing in one God that would have been raised with the belief in one God, and yet he dafka went and chose someone who was raised with idol worship.
Right. So it's a good question. So the idea that Abraham converts people around him is a midrashic one. It's not in the Torah. What the Torah does say is Vayikra sham b'shem Adonai el olam. Wherever he goes, he calls the name of God, but not necessarily to people around him. We don't know that Abraham had a household that practiced what he practiced, but I assume that at least Eliezer did that. Now, even if he had that, maybe Abraham wants to. Maybe that's just a theory. I'm not saying as an absolute thing. Maybe Abraham wants to do with his future daughter-in-law what Hashem did with him. He wants to take someone who grew up in one culture and make her completely shift her worldview. Because Abraham also grew within paganism. The whole idea that Abraham is someone who knows God, he believes in monotheism or anything like that is midrashic. And my mind is also adapted that. But if you look at the Torah, so Abraham grew up in a pagan household, and at the age of 75 was plucked out of there and brought to Israel, brought to Canaan. Why? Because he had good character traits. Ki da'ativ leman asher yetzavet banav beto harav. Hashem says, I chose Abraham because he will instruct his children in the ways of Hashem to do loving kindness and justice. That's it. That's Abraham. So maybe that's what he wants to do with his future daughter-in-law. However, Abraham says, just go to my clan. And the servant says, okay, once I get to the clan, I have to see how to talk to them. But he struck gold because he found someone who's a relative. So now he changes his version of events. He doesn't say, my master sent me to the land and to the clan, but rather he says, Im lo el bet avi telech ve'el mishpachti. You must go to the house of my parents and to my immediate family. Also, there's another difference. You see, in the when Avraham speaks to the servant, he says, "Ki el artzi ve'el moladati telech." In the positive, go to my land, go to my clan. In the rendition, the servant says, "Im lo el artzi ve'el moladati telech," meaning, go nowhere. Here. Im lo el bet avi telech ve'el mishpachti. You should go nowhere but to my family, my direct family. Now, so we'll see where else this narrative runs into a problem that the servant has to change that. Look at that. He comes to the well, right? And he makes this test. He says, anyone who would be so generous as to give me water and to give water to all my camels, that is the bride that was destined for my master's son, right? Now, if it was specifically the family, this makes no sense, right? Go to the family and talk to them, see who was eligible. So the answer is there was no interest in the family. He just wanted anyone from the city. So anyway, this works. What happens immediately after she does that? It says in verse 21, "Ve'aish mishta'ela." He is surprised. He's shocked. He's perplexed. What's going on here? But he realized that she is the one, and he asks, "Who are you? No, sorry. He doesn't ask, who are you? The moment she's done, when the camels had done drinking, he took a golden ring of half a shekel weight, that's a hefty one, and two bracelets. Now they translate for her hands, but it's not. Al yadeh means that he put it on her hands. He adorned her with the jewelry, which is just an interesting side, thought. Rivka, in this story, receives a golden ring that is worn on the nose. It's a nose ring. She was quite modern in terms of her fashion choice. So he gives her the jewelry without asking who she is. Then she says, "Bat mia tagidi narno," and then he asks this question. And when she says that she's the daughter of Betuel, the man is excited. He's really ecstatic. He says, "Thank God, Eloi Adoni Avraham, asher lo azav chasdo v'amito me'im Adoni." Thank God who had his not hesed, not mercy, his loyalty. Hashem has pact with my master. Anochi baderech nachani Adonai bet achai Adoni. I am on my path, and God has guided me to the house of my master's brother. Meaning he's happy because now his task is going to be much easier. But he didn't intend for this to be so. Now, the problem with his version, when he comes and tells them, my master insisted that I'll take someone from the family, they will say, hey, but why didn't you give her the jewelry before you found out who she is? What does he do? He changes his version. He says, after she gave water to all the camels, it's in verse 46, right? I asked her, whose daughter are you? She said, the daughter of Betuel. And I put the ring upon her nose and the bracelet upon her hands. Little tweaking of the story, but it makes all the difference. In Eliezer's, in the servant's version, first he checked out who she was, and once he found out that she was the daughter of Avram's family, he gave her the jewelry. Okay, now here's one of the greatest tricks of the servant, very subtle, and probably the one that delivered the last blow to Lavan Betuel. They couldn't refuse. And here's the word. In verse 37, the servant says, "Vayashbi'ani Adoni lemor." My master made me swear, right? And that is a correct recording of the original happening, because Avraham tells the servant, "Ve'ashbi'acha," I will make you swear, right? But the servant adds one more word, and that after his question of maybe the woman would not follow him, he says, my master told me Hashem will send his angel with you, and he will bring you to my family and to the house of my father, which is not what Avraham said. Avraham said, you will take a woman from a wife from my son from there, in general, from my clan. And if she wouldn't want to go with you, if the woman refuses, v'nikita mishuvuatizo, you're absolved of the oath of that I made you swear. But when the servant tells the story, he says, my master told me that the angel would bring me to the family. Az tinake me'alati, then you would be clear. Now you see the translation, oath, not good. Allah in Hebrew is a curse. Allah is an oath that is always joined with a curse. So there was no curse with Avraham, right? He just said this is the Shavuah, and if you don't do it, if she doesn't want to go, you're clear of the Shavuah. But the way the servant says it, he says that you will be clear of the curse. And who's to blame? Because you have already come to my family. And if they don't give you, you will be clear of the curse. So what does he insinuate? He insinuates that the curse will be on them, right? It's not about the girl wanting or not wanting to go. It's about the family letting or not letting her go. So the servants changed. If we sum it up, several things. Instead of speaking of the extended clan and the country, he speaks about the family. Instead of saying that he first gave the jewelry and then asked for a name, he reverses the order. First he checked for identity and then gave her the jewelry. Instead of using it in the positive, go to my land, he uses in the negative, go nowhere but my family. And instead of using the word oath, Shavuah uses the word curse. There's a curse cast upon he who would not get the wife for my master's son. And also, he casts it on the family and not on the girl. So now, after doing all that, he makes this statement that there's a curse by that man, and if they don't let him go, let her go, they will carry the curse. So the answer, ויען לבן ובתואל ויאמרו מאדוני יצא הדבר לא נוכל דבר אליך רע או טוב. Laban and Betuel answered and said, the thing proceeded from God. We cannot speak to you bad or good, right? When you say I can't tell you anything bad or good, that means I would have liked to tell you something bad, but I can't. Right? They don't say, oh, that's very exciting, it's beautiful news. Yeah, why not take her and go? Rather, they say, oh, we can't say anything bad. We're sorry, meaning that we are bound by your story because you threaten us with this oath, with this curse. Now, there's a change of mind. Immediately after that, on the next day, in verse 55, when he gets up in the morning and says, send me away to my master, they said, no, let the girl stay with us a few days, 10 days, yamim or asor, and then let her go. Some read it as 2 years or 10 years, some read it as 2 days, or which are probably more correct, a couple of days. Why do they want to delay her for a couple of days? And remember that Rivka here is a girl of maybe 17, 18. She's not a young girl. She's not a little girl. She's still a teenager. And only here they ask her. When he says, let me go, they say, let's call Rivka and ask her what she says, right? What changed their mind? I think that what changed their mind is verse 53. After the deal was struck, after they accepted the deal, it says, the servant brought forth jewels of silver and gold and raiment and gave them to Rebekah, to Rivka. He gave also to her brother and to her mother precious things. That is not a correct translation. This is the old JPS. Migdanot in Hebrew is candies. It comes from the word meged. Meged is oil. It is something sweets or pastry cooked in heavy oil. So what happened is that he comes with those, as we read here, Asara gemalim amusim mikol tuv adonav. He comes with kol tuv adonav be'ado. He brings all the riches of his master's house. And he comes and he has this whole conversation with them, with the chest sitting at the side, and Lavan and Betuel are eyeing that and say, okay, we're going to get something of it. It's a good deal. But they didn't realize that with all this conversation, he never said how much I'm going to pay you for your daughter. So he opens the chest. He says, here, all this jewelry is for you, Rivka. And they know that she's going to take it back to her husband's house. They got nothing of it. They only got candies. So now they're trying to stall. Say, oh, let her wait for another couple of days. Now that, on one hand, like it's amusing, so you're like laughing with that. But it's really amusing on one hand, but it's really very sad on the other, because what is Rivka's role in this whole thing? Rivka is not consulted. They only consult Rivka when they think they can make a gain from it. Only when they think that we could maybe get money from this man before he takes her away. And I think that this is probably the reason that later on, when Rivka finds out that she has 2 children and that there might be a struggle between them, and she should have gone and told her husband, this is what I've been told by the prophet, whoever this was, and I think that you should look at Esav and Yaakov differently. She never speaks to him. Instead, she plots behind his back, and she helps Yaakov wrestle the right of the firstborn and the blessing from Esav, and it didn't end well. Yaakov had to run away. The family was destroyed, and then it led to the selling of Yosef. So many terrible things happened because of that. Why wasn't she able to communicate to Yitzhak? I think that one of the reasons was that as a little girl she realized that, or a young woman, she realized that she doesn't count. She sits there, maybe in her room, maybe behind the door, and she listens to this whole conversation. They're talking about her. That stranger, that man who came in the name of another stranger that she never knew of, comes and says, I'm going to take the girl to another land. Did anyone ask her if she wants to leave her country? But once they said, let her go, she says, I'll go. And then on the next day they said, no, let her stay. And she knows it's only because they didn't get what they wanted. And she says, okay, in a man's world, probably the way for me to behave is not to be direct. They're not going to listen to my voice. I'll have to be cunning. I'll have to work behind the scenes. So I think that is tied to the next story, to the next narrative of Rivka plotting behind Yitzhak back to get the Bechorah, not because she didn't love him, because she loved him dearly and respected him, but she felt that maybe she cannot communicate with him, and that is an important thing to have in mind. Yes, Shayna, you have a question?
Yeah, that's very interesting. I've never thought of that aspect of their miscommunication. Because they obviously didn't communicate. That was a vast miscommunication.
Right.
But is there anything else to support that? Like anything else in any of the text or anything to get this idea that she didn't have a voice directly with him?
There's very little. I don't think that we find, the only dialogue that we find of Rivka with, the only dialogue that we find of Rivka with her husband is a deceptive one, Look what we have. 1 second. Rivka. Look, when Rivka meets Yitzhak, she covers herself. So up until that moment, she was revealed, meaning he could see her, but now she hides her face. So that is an element of mystery, but also sort of a precursor telling us, there's going to be an element here of miscommunication. She's hiding from him, and then after Yitzhak, after she's being told that she has 2 sons, she doesn't go and tell Yitzhak, and the only dialogue that Rivka and Yitzhak have is at the end of Parashat Toledot. It's chapter. 1 second. It's in chapter 27, verse 46. She tells Yitzhak, "Katzti b'chayai mipnei benot het." I am sick and tired of the Hittite woman. Im lokech Yaakov isha mibenot het. If Yaakov marries a Hittite woman, kaele mibenot haaretz, one of the girls of the land, lama li hayim. So in total, all the words that were spoken between Yitzhak and Rivka and that are recorded in the Chumash, 17 words. That's not much of a dialogue. So that I think is supports the idea. I mean, other than that, it's just a guess. I mean, we don't really know. I think, and that in itself is the beauty of the biblical narrative. The Torah doesn't tell us too much. The Torah tells us a story and lets us fill in the gaps. So it depends on the families that we know, depends on the people that we know, we interpret it differently. I think maybe 100 years ago, nobody would have thought of it as the silenced voice of women. And I think today we understand it more. And actually this understanding came in a workshop that I did on Tanakh, and I asked people to take on the roles of Yitzhak and Rivka and others, and that understanding emerged that just as they were talking, one of the person who was playing Rivka said, "Nobody ever listens to me." So I had to do what I did. Okay, so I think with that we'll conclude the discussion of the parasha. There's much more to see there. And Be'ezrat Hashem, we'll meet again next week for the parasha.